Welcome to another conversation in our FM Expert series. Today I'm joined by, I want to say Debs. Am I saying Debra Ward? Debs, Debra?
Debs, anything but Debbie, just not
Okay.
Debbie.
Well, I'm letting this roll because I think everyone needs to hear that. So welcome, Debs. It's really, really lovely to have you here. I've wanted to do this conversation for a long time. So thank you very much for joining us. Debs, for those of you who don't know, is the director at Live, Love and Learn and has a huge wealth of experience in FM. We discussed, we think, around 17 years plus. And you're going to share with us your ethos, your thoughts, your experience on how to create, nurture and protect teams. And that's how you work with businesses now. So I'm going to hand over to you and I'm going to make loads of notes because I'm going to learn here as well. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Oh, thanks, Beth. It's so good to see you. And finally, we got together again.
Yeah.
I'm always richer from having spoken to you. So again, I thank you. Yeah, I mean, Live, Love, Learn is a consultancy company. We talk about how to create, nurture, and protect corporate culture in this agile world. I'm a strong believer that people, service, and culture are the only true differentiators in this highly competitive marketplace that is constantly pivoting, constantly shifting. And, if you just look at my career alone, I have moved a lot. I have changed, industries and jobs. And the consistent, though, has always been people, service, and culture. And I really believe that those are the key differentiators. Back in the day, we were all about production, and it was all about Kaizen and reducing the production line by a certain percentage. And then it was about process and Lean Six Sigma. And if you weren't a black belt, you were nobody. And then we went into place, and it was, how do we rack, pack, and stack and sweat the asset and put more people in per square foot?
Yeah.
And finally, I really think we were into people. And for me, this is what makes everything richer.
So the movement, the final hello, let's get to people and the important bit, do you think that was pre-COVID? Do you think COVID was the game changer to change that? What's your experience?
For sure, I think we're having more honest conversations. I think that barriers were removed. I think people were more vulnerable. I think there was a lot more empathy, which I really loved it. I mean, if there is a silver lining out of COVID, that is it for me. It was when you asked somebody, how are you? You genuinely wanted to know. You were really genuinely saying, no, really, how are you? And people were quite forthcoming with where they were on their emotional scale. And that was all genres, all, different levels. I mean, I had CEOs on global forums talk about their own emotional roller coaster, and that they appreciated that it was tough for everybody. And, for me, that was the greatest thing. I hope we don't lose it. I hope we don't get back into the treadmill of life and kind of get back into the profit over people philosophy. And
I think we're doing this a bit, aren't we? I think people it's easier to fall back into that, but I think we need to kind of keep on pushing to not lose that, because like you say, it's important, isn't it?
I think we're finding our way. We've never been here before, right?
Yeah.
We've never, ever been. I mean, we said that all the way through COVID, but post-COVID, we've never been there before either. Trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and getting people back into the office, not getting into the office, hybrid, agile, job sharing. It's just, there's a lot to grapple with. I mean, business was tough before. And then we add all these other dynamics into it. And again, I go back to people, service, and culture. These are the things they're gonna help us steer through these tough waters as companies, and focusing on that. I mean, the other thing I'm really thrilled about is when I first started talking about people, service, and culture 25 years ago, people would roll their eyes at me, and I was the fluffy girl,
Yes.
And it wasn't really as well accepted. But, Gallup's come out with a stat that says that focusing on people, service, and culture gives 21% higher productivity and 22% more profit. I mean, the fluffy girl wins, in my opinion. 22% more profit. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
And I think,
and that's recent stats, is it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Yeah.
And there's tons of stats coming out from Gallup, from HBR, from McKinsey. Customer experience, employee experience are the true differentiators. And I think that they're going to, who was it that I can't remember who it was. It was a Gallup. Gallup said that it was going to override cost as the number one differentiator. So I think that, fantastic, because, that's where our focus should be. That's the thing that makes products richer, makes, buying power, makes loyalty, word of mouth advertising, reduces absenteeism, increases productivity, net promoter scores go up. I mean, twice as many, according to MIT, those companies in the top 25% of employee experience have twice as many successful innovations than those in the bottom quartile. And those innovations generate twice as much revenue. I mean, again,
Well, and it's about how you make people feel, isn't it? And I think organizations who aren't asking their employees what would be good for you, what do you want, what can we do, and they think they know better, are getting it wrong, and they're losing good people, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's a balance. Don't get me wrong, there's a balance. We're in business to make a profit. We can't be throwing all of that away, right? We need to make a profit, otherwise there are no jobs to protect, nurture, and support. So, let's get it right. So we can't be throwing the baby out with bathwater, but there is definitely a swing. And then you can see that, the team member rules now. They can pick and choose. In the war for talent, they can just go down the street, command, a better, and it's not even about salary anymore. It's it's better benefits. It's a better social life. My son, he had 2 job offers, and he chose the one that had that were more focused on environmental issues. We're more focused on social give backs. We're more focused on their social inclusion within their organization, how to create that, because these kids have been locked down for 2 years. They want an avenue to learn from each other, to grow from each other, and that's why he chose the one he did. And I was like, wow, none of that registered when I was applying for my first job.
What's the salary? What's the salary? Do I get a car?
Can I start tomorrow? Because I have student loans to pay.
That's interesting. So it's about nurturing, creating this corporate culture, protecting your teams. We've talked about people service. So how do people do this? How does somebody listening to this thinking, I love the sound of this, and you've given us some tips already, but what are some really tangible things that either managers can do for their teams or team members can suggest to their managers? What are some things people can do? Because I think people will be absolutely buying into this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, starting with your team member surveys, making sure they're anonymous, making sure you're not biasing the outcomes. And making sure once you do it, that you don't hide from the results. Or worse yet, I've seen where people carve out the results they want to show, right? And they don't show all the warts and all. And the reality is we can't grow without this learning. And, it was interesting. I was speaking to a client the other day, and I don't know where we got it in our heads that we have to be perfect all of the time. And the time to make a mistake, I mean, especially the new kids coming in, right? The fear culture that's taken over in organizations really terrifies me, because the reality is, as leaders, our number one job is to help them solve problems. Right? That's what we're there to do, is to help young people solve problems so that they can grow from it, so we can all learn from it, and so we can all be better. And instead, we tend to turn on them and blame them and point fingers and discipline them. And I'm just thinking, these are honest mistakes. These are things that we're human beings. We're gonna make mistakes. And if we're not creating that psychological safety, for people to come to us, then they're gonna hide it. They're gonna lie about it. They're gonna point fingers. Gonna blame it. They're gonna come up with excuses, and that doesn't further the company. It doesn't further the organization. It doesn't further the individual. And it terrifies me. The more organizations I go into, the more and more I see this, that people have this culture of fear. And so they're not willing to put their head above the parapet. They're not willing to do to come up with innovations and create. They're not willing to do any discretionary effort, which, as we know, is a big part of that 22% higher profitability.
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because so many organizations will say, no, we have a culture that allows people to feel X, Y, and Z, but they don't. And I think it's quite hard to teach culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess the starting point for an organization is understanding what their culture is.
Yeah, so I tend to do an audit right away just to find out where baseline is. You know, I'll go in and I'll do a culture audit. I mean, something as simple as when's the last time your manager said thank you?
Okay, really? Oh, no. Can you give me an idea of how depressing the answers you get are?
Yeah, I mean, I get laughter is what I get back, right? And it's such
Wow.
a simple question. I mean, the top 100 best places to work, that's one of the questions they ask, right? Because it's a really simple question that tells you a lot about an organization really quickly,
Yeah.
right? When was the last time your manager talked to you about your career path?
Yeah.
When was the last time your manager did something to help you on
Yeah.
that career path, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like you say, that's got to be a bit warts and all, and the leaders have got to accept it and hear it. And even if they disagree with it, it's somebody else's reality. It's what their team members are experiencing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, and that's what terrifies me is the fact that they're carving out what they want to hear and they're sharing that with the board because they're afraid.
Yeah.
You know, I would much rather somebody came to me and said, you know, this is dreadful. These
Yeah.
are dreadful results. We've highlighted 4 areas that we really need to improve on. And by the way, here's our action plan, and we need £500,000 to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That's just such a more healthy way to continue to evolve, to be more successful, to grow, to to get the best out of people and organizations.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I was just thinking while you were talking, if you think of a typical dashboard you have for KPIs, SLAs, compliance, whatever it is, the most important dashboard is the stuff that you're talking about, isn't it? And that needs to move from being a fluffy dashboard to the absolute bare bones, because you can't be compliant if you haven't got people who are going to be supporting you. You can't do this if you haven't. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that ground up approach, that groundswell that comes from a powerfully engaged, liberated workforce. I mean, you know, I was talking about this with client services back in 2007. I mean, we built a whole company on psychological safety and reward and recognition. I mean, I try and tell people all the time, go catch people doing something right. Like criticism is freaking easy. That's just lazy leadership. You know, go catch people doing something right, because then it becomes a groundswell and a momentum and a motivation for people to want to do more of the same. And you can see it in organizations that do that, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've made notes, and I'm sure anyone listening to this is making notes, because it's, you know what, there's things that people think, oh, it'd be nice to have. And I think hopefully listening to this, it will push these things to a higher point in the priority list, because from an operational perspective, you're dealing with the reactive stuff so often, and it's easy to push this down, but this is key, isn't it? You've given us
scores go up 77%.
Yeah.
You know, net promoter scores, which is what we're all kind of chasing, 77% higher than those people in the bottom quartile. Who doesn't want that, right? Like, it's just, you know, the viability and the longevity and the success and the profitability of companies really rely on your people. And if you're not treating them with dignity, respect, grace, and empathy, you're going to lose the game.
I'm conscious of your time, and I'm thinking, let me have another minute with you. Can you give me one more thing? One more thing, because you've given us loads already. Is there anything else you can think of that would just be an absolute gem for whether it's a manager listening or whether it's a team member listening? Something else that would just be another brilliant takeaway, because you're packed full of knowledge.
Thanks. Yeah, I think if I could ask every leader, every manager, every supervisor, is that you're dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
Right? Deal with the whole human. Don't deal with the employee. Don't deal with the outcome-based result that you're anticipating. Don't deal with where they fit on your KPI register and how much they contribute to it. Deal with a human being, because you can never lose them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for a conversation that on paper kind of sounds obvious, I think people need to be reminded of the obvious stuff, don't they? And you've done that. I feel like we need to do another 10 of these. There needs to be a series. But no, genuinely amazing work that you're doing, and even just those few tips that you've shared with us, they're important for people to hear. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Beth. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Deb. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.